Welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. Today we are going to talk about the Record Store Day releases for Black Friday coming up on November 29th. These videos are always popular, right? Because what I do, or what I plan to do, is to go down the list of every jazz, or in this case, I added in the blues titles as well, because frankly, there's not enough jazz titles. There's less than there were last year. So I'm going to get into that. But what we're going to talk about is each of the titles, so that so you know what's coming out. I'm going to talk about the quantity so that you can try to gauge, like, which of these are going to be scarce. I'm going to give you my opinion on what I think are the best titles of the bunch. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So if this is your first time here, I always get a lot of guests. When I'll say guests for these Record Store Day videos, please do hit like and do hit subscribe. Helps me out quite a bit, and maybe consider checking out some of the other videos on my channel. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so it is not uncommon to have a Bill Evans title featured for Record Store Day, and typically it's put out either by Resonance or Elemental, and guess what? We have another one this year. So this is Bill Evans in Norway. So this is live at Kongsberg, recorded in 1970, and it is being put out by Elemental Music, which is Zeb Feldman's label. So what about this title? Well, it's a double LP. What they're saying, it's really interesting. The Record Store Day website says that it's in a quantity of 4,500, which is not terribly scarce. But then I saw on actually Elemental's own website, it said the quantity is 8,850. So I'm actually personally wondering whether those additional titles are going to be made available abroad, or if they're going to be made available after Record Store Day, because I did notice this is going to be put out on CD following Record Store Day as well. So in terms of the mastering process, Elemental is known for finding just fantastic recordings and presenting them in the best way possible, and it sounds like this one has sort of the ingredients for that as well. So this is being remastered at the Mastering Lab. It's being pressed on 180 gram vinyl by Memphis Record Pressing. And in terms of where this content came from, apparently it was found at the Kongsberg Jazz Festival archive. So before this recording was being made available for Record Store Day, no one actually knew that this particular concert was recorded. So that's kind of fun, right? No one's heard it before. This is the first time is to pick it up in this format. So speaking of format, Bill Evans in 1970 had been recording with maybe a different trio than you're used to if you're used to hearing Bill Evans say earlier in his career. So his trio was filled out by Eddie Gomez and Marty Morell. And he was actually with them for about 6 years. So it was a sort of a well-rehearsed trio. And if I'm thinking about another release around the same time that also featured this trio, you can actually find them on the Montreux 2 album, which was put out for CTI. That particular concert is actually not the best recorded. There were some sonic issues, even though they ended up putting it out in CTI. Still a worthwhile album to pick up, but what it sounds like is that this is going to be, again, very same trio, actually recorded just 6 days after that Montreux 2 album. So it may be that this is the better way to hear that trio at this particular time. So Elemental is always known for having a great packaging, right? And so this one also comes with a photo, with a bunch of photos, I think, in a booklet. So yeah, I'm sure that it's going to be very well presented as well. All right, so the next one is actually a little bit curious. This is Herbie Hancock's Possibilities. So, when I hear Herbie Hancock and I think Record Store Day, I'm like, oh, wow, this is really exciting, especially because I hadn't heard of the album Possibilities. Well, I'll sort of temper that excitement just a little bit. So this was originally put out in 2005, actually on CD only, as well as there was actually an accompanying DVD that talked about it, I think, the making of it. And this is the first time that it's ever been put out on vinyl. But what this music is it actually features Herbie Hancock performing alongside just a number of guest musicians and singers. And so those include Trey Anastasio, Christina Aguilera, John Mayer, Paul Simon, a number of different folks. And how it sort of materializes here is, really leveraging the talents of the people that he brought in, right? So there's a lot of vocals here. I would say that there's a heavy sort of pop element to the music, And not that surprising for Herbie Hancock, right? Because he got involved in all kinds of music. It's just that when I saw Herbie Hancock and I thought Record Store Day, I wanted it to be I wanted it to be like a small jazz focused group, and that does not seem to be what this music is. So Rhino is the label that is putting this out. It's in a triple LP format, because there's just so much music. They're putting it out in a quantity of 3,000, so not terribly, not that wide of a release, but maybe not that scarce either, sort of somewhere in the middle. And they're actually putting it out on ruby red vinyl. So yeah, I mean, it's a ton of music. I think if you like any of those artists that I mentioned that he's sort of featuring here, then maybe this is something to pick up. But for me, somebody who tends to focus on instrumental jazz, and then I kind of do, some singers from like the 50s and 60s, that's more of my sweet spot, so I'm probably going to pass on this one. All right, so the next one up is the very first blues title I'm going to be covering, and this is John Lee Hooker's Don't Turn Me From Your Door. This is being put out by Rhino. It's just a single LP in a quantity of only 2,000. So I think this one may actually be a difficult one to get, not only because it's a lower quantity, but also because I think there's a lot of love for John Lee Hooker, really across fans of all genres. So a couple of interesting things about this. So this is actually being released with with what they're calling just an alternate artwork. I don't know if that artwork was used for some version of this, but when this was put out by Atco Records in 1961, definitely had a different cover. So what else about this? Well, they're putting it out on yellow vinyl, which, as long as it sounds the same, I suppose. It's 180 gram. Record and mastered and cut by Matthew Luthans, who's been doing really some excellent work on a number of releases lately. So I mentioned that this was put out in 1961. So what that original album consisted of was actually 6 songs that had been recorded in 1953, and then 6 songs that had just been recorded in 1961. So even that original release was a little bit of a compilation. With this Record Store Day version, they're actually adding some additional tracks not included on that original release, so you get even more content. As far as what sort of style you're going to come across, I mean, this is like, I would call it more of an older style of blues. It's just John Lee Hooker singing alongside a guitar, and the guitar work, I think, between the two eras, right, is either Eddie Kirkland or Earl Hooker, which was John Lee Hooker's cousin, that are accompanying John Lee Hooker on guitar. So I did preview some of the tracks on this, and it sounds amazing. I don't actually own the original. But what I heard online sounded amazing. If you're interested in this type of music, check out the title track, actually, "Don't Turn Me From Your Door." All right, so the next one up is by the very talented scat singer Al Jarreau, and this is titled "Wow," live in performance at the Shield Herald. It was recorded in 1976. So this is being put out by Resonance Records, very well respected. You always see them at Record Store Day. It's a double LP put out in a quantity of just 1,300, so that's going to be pretty scarce. So what this content is a live radio recording. So this was of a performance, though, at the DC Club, Washington DC Club Shield Herald, which I think was pretty popular in the 1970s. The actual release is being put out on 180 grams, and what else? Well, it's mastered and cut, all analog by Matthew Luthans. So you know. I mentioned earlier that sometimes I don't necessarily get into some of the singers, but I like some of the older singers, the earlier singers, and Al Jarreau is one of those artists who's always impressed me, even if I don't own a bunch of his albums. There's just something that it's amazing what he could do with his voice. I think probably the sort of the pivotal song that a lot of people know him for, perhaps, is his rendition of Take Five, which is amazing. Like, even if you don't really like sort of vocals in this music, there's no denying that he wasn't just an amazing artist. So speaking of, in this double LP release, you do get versions of James Taylor's Fire and Rain. You get Count Basie's Shiny Stockings, You get a version of "You Don't See Me," and again, and again, "Take Five," which I think this was recorded maybe earlier than the one that ended up making it on an album, and being sort of well recognized and very closely associated with Al Jarreau. So yeah, this one, it's one of those things that I may pick up just even because it's resonance, right? Because their stuff just always sounds good. They always do such a great job of representing music, on vinyl, and in like the packaging and the process that they use. And yeah, if you haven't heard Al Jarreau sing Take Five, you're gonna have to YouTube it or Google it, because yeah, like I said, it's really something. All right, I got another blues one for you. This is BB King in France, live at the Nancy Jazz Pulsations Festival from 1977. This is being put out in partnership between Elemental and Deep Digs. It's a double LP in a quantity of just 2,800. The vinyl is 180 gram. It's mastered and cut, all analog by Matthew Luthans. And this is actually one that's a little bit of a like I don't know that much about it because it's previously unissued live recording. So this is the first time it's being put out. But I think BB King speaks for himself. If this is the type of music that you're into, then my guess is you're going to be super excited about being able to hear him in concert in 1977. So the next one up is a more contemporary release. This is by the amazing guitarist Julian Lage, and it is live in Los Angeles. So this is being put out by Mac Avenue. I typically see them at Record Store Day as well, and they put out some great titles in the past. This release is actually not a full-length LP. It's actually an EP consisting of 5 live tracks, and these are live renditions of songs that were from his 2016 album Arclight. I also believe that this is his only live recording to date. So I'm a big fan of Julian Lage. I have a number of albums that he put out, and there's something about sort of the character, this sort of quality of his guitar playing that just sounds so amazing, especially on vinyl. So this is an interesting one. I'll be interested to see the size of it. So knowing it's an EP, are they going to put it on a full size disc? I'm not actually sure what to expect with this one. It is a relatively limited release, though, in a quantity of just 1,500. So it's very likely that a number of stores won't be getting it at all, and it may be a little bit more difficult of a title to find. All right, so the last blues one that I'm going to cover in this Record Store Day list is actually a pretty exciting one, especially for those of you who don't already have any Charley Patton. Charley Patton's stuff is almost impossible to get because it was all on a shellac disc, 78 RPM, and very, very sought after by collectors. The stuff goes for thousands of dollars, even in bad condition. And my only exposure to Charley Patton has been in some of the compilations, right, that have been put out in the past, and that is what this is as well. So this is Charley Patton, the father of Delta blues, selections from Paramount Recordings. So yeah, so who's putting this out? It's ORG Music. It's in a quantity of just 1,400, so it is also going to be scarce. A little bit of side eye at the color vinyl that they are using, but it is being pressed at Furnace Record Pressing, and the remastering on this is, which I think is an important note, just because this music has been made available through needle drop kind of recordings and stuff like that in the past. This one is being remastered by Dave Gardner. So what I would be looking out for, and why I'm a little bit intrigued with this one, is that because some of the other compilations don't necessarily have the best audio quality because the transfer just wasn't very good, and a lot of the source content is just in such poor condition, right? There can't be more than like a handful of copies of like some of these records left. And so finding a source copy that's actually in decent shape is borderline impossible. Every time I've heard a Charley Patton song, it's been very crackly. So I'm very interested to learn more, I guess, about what they were able to do with this particular remastering. You may otherwise be familiar with this release, which is the version, not the version, because it's different than this. It's a different compilation, but this is a title that I have, and it's simply called "Founder of the Delta Blues." And I believe that like almost all of the tracks that are on this Record Store Day release are also here, but the remastering on this is different. Like I said, it's very crackly. So I would, I'd be interested in learning more and finding out if it's going to sound good, because as much as this stuff still sounds good to me, because I'm just fascinated by Charley Patton and some of these early artists. I'm just always interested in hearing something that's going to sound maybe even a little bit better. All right, so this next one I think is going to be probably one of the most sought after releases on Record Store Day for those of you who like jazz. So that title is Max Roach's Deeds Not Words. This is actually an original pressing that I have, but Kraft Recordings is reissuing this in mono, which I think is exciting. I have to imagine this came out in stereo as well. I'm actually not entirely sure on that, but in any event, they're putting it out in mono. Um, Quantity of only 2,500, so somewhat scarce. In terms of the source, well, this is an all analog, so triple A release. Lacquers cut from the original tapes by Kevin Gray, 180 gram tip on jacket. So this is basically everything that people love about Kraft's releases, and I mean, their stuff for Record Store Day just always gets a lot of attention, right? Whether it's Chet Baker or Art Pepper, and now this fantastic album by Max Roach. I'm a big fan of this album. The lineup on here includes obviously Max, but Booker Little, George Coleman, Ray Draper, and Art Davis. And this is just a classic, group. 1958. Just really fantastic stuff. I'm a huge fan of this album, and I think that this feels like it's probably one of the only opportunities in recent memory to actually pick up a new release of this album. My guess is it hasn't been tackled in quite some time. So I think this is one of those ones that it's going to be unfortunate if people buy to flip, but I think it's going to be pretty desirable. All right, so another iconic album that's getting reissued for Record Store Day is Gil Scott-Heron and Brian Jackson's From South Africa to South Carolina. This is being put out by Culture Factory USA, a label I'm actually not that familiar with, but this is it's a double LP format in a quantity of 3,000. So why it's a double LP format is because they're actually adding additional content. So this is not only the 1975 studio album, but they're adding something like 4 bonus tracks as well. And so I think that's what extends into the second disc. But otherwise, they're keeping the gatefold jacket. The original was gatefold as well. This is a color vinyl edition as well, so it's gold and white colored vinyl, and I believe that the jacket also has an obi on it. Gil Scott-Heron gets a lot of attention, deservedly, and anytime his stuff gets reissued, like Winter in America was reissued, like last year? Was that a Record Store Day release? It might have been. But anyway, it like I said, it gets a lot of attention. So I think this is going to be a popular one as well. All right, so for those of you who love rare records and the opportunity to own reissues of rare records that you otherwise would never be able to find, this one is pretty exciting. So this is Sahib Shihab's Jazz Party, and actually it's billed as Jazz Party and After Hours. So I'll explain in just a second. So this is being put out by ORG Music. It's a double LP in a quantity of just 1,250. Consider me one of the people who is going to be desperately trying to find this because I've never been able to have a version of this. It's actually never been released on vinyl in the United States, and I don't think has had a quality release like by permission maybe ever. So all right, so I mentioned the quantity. So what this is it was recorded live at the Jazz House Montmartre in Copenhagen. Forgive my pronunciation. How it's being presented is a gatefold jacket, and there is a bonus LP. So I mentioned Sahib's Jazz Party and After Hours. Jazz Party is the original album. After Hours is what they're referring to as like 3 additional tracks that previously weren't available. So they're adding that extra LP with these additional tracks and pairing it with the album. So in terms of the source content, I do know that this was remastered by Dave Gardner. I don't know if it was from the original tapes, and this one was pressed at Palace in Germany. So if you went onto Discogs and added this to your want list, what you would find is that there's just a single copy that is currently available for over $5,000. Now, I think that they're playing into the idea that it's the only copy available because the most expensive I've seen one sell for on Discogs anyway is over $1,000. But any way you look at it, it is just impossibly rare. You're never going to find an original copy of it. And now, finally, like this is like one of those great examples where fans, like sort of super fans of some of this like obscure stuff, get rewarded for Record Store Day. So even though it's only a quantity of 1,250, it's possible no one's going to be looking out for it, and maybe you'll still be able to get it. But like I'm going to be looking around for this one. and trying to get a copy. So we've got some more Sun Ra this year as well. So this is Sun Ra Lights on a Satellite live at the Left Bank 1978. This is being put out by Resonance Records. It's a double LP, quantity of just 1,500. And the lacquers on this were cut by Matthew Luthans. So I do believe that this is the very first time this material has ever been made available, and sounds like it's a good complement to what was the trying to remember now what the release was like. Was it last year or earlier this year that was like the Live in Chicago Sun Ra release? Anyway, I think that was also put out by either Resonance or Elemental, so probably a good complement to that. And obviously, for those of you who love Sun Ra, this will be something that you're interested in. I'm, traditionally not the biggest fan of Sun Ra. I really only have a couple of his albums, and those are the ones that were like his earliest, where just kind of playing in a different style. And I never really got into all of his sort of orchestra work. But who am I to tell you what to get? I know that there's a ton of Sun Ra fans out there that are going to be excited about Live at the Left Bank. All right, so even though there's not a lot of jazz releases this year, there sure is a lot of variety, and this next one is a good example of that. So this is Cecil Taylor's Live at the Cafe, that word I can't say again, Montmartre. I think part of it is my Invisalign that I'm working through. So this is being put out by ORG Music. It's a double LP, quantity of 1,500. So again, small quantities for a lot of these titles. It's interesting. This is also being remastered by Dave Gardner, so he has quite a presence across a number of these titles this year. Otherwise, what to say about this? Well, the pressing plant is Palace, and they've been doing such a great job lately for a lot of releases. Who accompanies Cecil Taylor? Well, it is a trio, but it's not maybe a traditional trio, because you have Jimmy Lyons on sax, and then you also have Arthur Murray here. So this content was originally recorded in 1962. And it very much falls into the free jazz space. So know that going in, that this is not your sort of traditional jazz piano trio. This is very much experimental. Cecil Taylor was doing just amazing, innovative things really over the course of his entire career. But I think that this 1962 recording is a great example. This is another one of those albums that's just extraordinarily hard to get in its original form. I think it's going to set you back at least a couple $100. It's originally put out on the Danish just debut label, so not Charles Mingus's debut records, but like the sort of the reinvigoration of that they did in Denmark. So that's this release. I've owned a copy of this in the past, and it's a little bit too adventurous for me, but probably not for many of you. All right, so one of the other titles that I'm most looking forward to on Record Store Day this year is this next one. This is Charles Tolliver and really Music Inc., his band, and the title is Live at the Captain's Cabin. So this is being put out by Reel to Reel Recordings. It is a double LP as well, in a quantity of just 1,500. And actually, this music, what it is, it's actually newly discovered. So this hasn't previously been released. It's being put out for the first time here for Record Store Day. Who accompanies Charles Tolliver? Well, we have John Hicks, Clint Houston, and Cliff Barbaro. Let's see. The recording was mastered by Kevin Gray with audio transferred from the original tape reels. Remember, it was a live session, so it's a little bit different than master tapes, right? They typically refer to tape reels in terms of what they used for those live recordings. Otherwise, being put out 180 gram. There's an interview with Charles Tolliver that's included. You also got essay and like photos. So it seems to be a complete package, again, in this double LP format. And if it sounds good, if it's like if it was recorded well, I think that this is just going to be a really exciting release, because I love Charles Tolliver's releases that he did for Strata East, and I just think he's an amazing musician, and I want more of it. And finally, so the Jazz Dispensary offshoot of Craft Recordings has a history of putting out a title for Record Store Day every year. And so this is their entry this year, and it is titled The Golden Hour. So to kind of refresh your memory, each of the releases that they've done are compilations of tracks that exist within not the crafts, but really sort of the broader Concord music archives, right? So they pick individual tracks from musicians, they compile it together, and it always has that kind of Jazz Dispensary vibe to it, if you will. So yeah, put out by Jazz Dispensary in a quantity of 4,000. So actually there's going to be a number of copies of this out there. They're putting it out on what they're calling Golden Wave Swirl vinyl. And I took a look at the list of tracks here, and I actually think this is a really good compilation. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't also go track down the original sort of source material for each of these tracks, but the compilation is quite good. So there's one by Johnny Hammond Smith, which I actually think is one of the highlights of the album here. There's another by Hampton Hawes. There's one by Nat Adderley, which is also a highlight. So Johnny, I mean, it's all great, but like Johnny Hammond Smith and the Nat Adderley tracks are ones you should try to seek out. You also have Gene Ammons. You have a Sonny Rollins tune. There's a Chico Hamilton one. There's one by Catalyst, which I think is really, really exciting. And it actually makes me wonder if now either Jazz Dispensary or Kraft is going to tackle putting out like a full Catalyst album, because that stuff is just fantastic. I think that would get a lot of energy from the fans out there. And then the only other one that I wanted to mention is there's a Vince Guaraldi tune on here, and the track is Little Birdie. So this is really interesting because Little Birdie was featured in the Thanksgiving TV special. And it is such a it's such a curious tune because Vince Guaraldi sings on it, and it's just super 70s, and but it's also fantastic. And so it was such a curious addition here to hear it, especially considering I recently bought the Thanksgiving, soundtrack, Charlie Brown Thanksgiving soundtrack, and actually even covered it here in this format because I was interviewing the sons of the producer who put it out. And anyway, it was just such a surprise to see it being put in a Jazz Dispensary compilation, but I also just love it. I love the inclusion of it. All right, so just one more. I almost forgot this one, but I didn't. So this is Emily Remler, and it's titled "Cookin' at the Queen's." So this is actually from, I believe, a radio broadcast. This was performed live in Las Vegas. Couple of sessions, 1984, and then another date in 1988. So this is being put out by Resonance Records. It's a triple LP. And actually, so this is another one of those that they're putting out on LP for Record Store Day, but similar with some of these other Resonance releases, they're actually following it up with CD and digital in December. And so if you're not a vinyl person, you want to wait for that, you can. So again, mentioned radio. So this is previously unreleased collection of performances. It was broadcast originally on KNPR Las Vegas as part of their weekly radio program. So, as is typical with Resonance releases, right? They're putting it out on 180 gram. This one is mastered from the original tape reels by Bernie Grunman, so that's some pretty good cred, and it is being pressed at Le Vinylist. All right, so this one actually features two different formats. So there's a quartet format for the 1984 date, and then there's a trio format for the 1988 date. The only carryover outside of Remler, obviously on guitar, is bassist Carson Smith. So the first format is piano, guitar, bass, and drums, and then the second one is just that trio format of guitar, bass, and drums. So yeah, I think with this one, and as with some of these other Resonance ones, you can count on the packaging being top notch. I already mentioned the 180 gram vinyl, but yeah, I think this one could be interesting. Again, it's all about the quality, I think, of the recordings. But what I've heard from some of these other Resonance titles that they're sourcing that were originally put out on radio. I mean, listen, it's not like somebody is putting a microphone up to like a home speaker and recording something that came through on the radio, right? Like this is stuff that was recorded. It just happened to be recorded live and then made available or put out for radio. But again, they are sourcing this from the original tape reels, and yeah, I think this one has some promise as well. All right, so that is the list this year. Is it possible that I missed something? Yeah, it is possible because I made one of these videos one year, and in between me making the video and like it basically getting posted, they went in and updated. They went in and updated the list, and so I like forgot one. But anyway, this is accurate as of the list that I saw today. And but if I did miss something, put it in the comments. Remember, I'm trying to focus on sort of jazz and sort of blues, or adjacent kind of releases. So if I was to sum up this record store day, I would say a couple of things about it. So one is there's not many titles here. So remember, I added in the blues titles in order to like make this a little bit longer list, but there's only like 11 sort of, put in quotes like jazz releases. That's less than prior years. The quantities of these is extremely low outside of a couple, right? So outside of the Bill Evans title, the Jazz Dispensary title, but a lot of these others are just not in large quantities. Even the Max Roach Deeds Not Words. I feel like if this was a prior, like a different year, Kraft's might have put out like double that quantity. So this is definitely seems to be more exclusive. There's going to be fewer copies, only like 1,200, 1,500 of some of these. So that's kind of interesting. There's also a lot of double and triple discs. Now that's kind of been a trend lately, but this year, gosh, it seems like almost everything is at least a double disc. So that's going to add cost to some of these as well. So I think it is important for people to figure out, how to prioritize their money on record store day, and obviously, don't wait for the flipper action on eBay. So if I'm share with you what I'm most excited about, a little bit of a mishmash, and I think you probably got a sense of this through my discussion, but the Max Roach title, even though I already have a copy, you know me, I love to check out the new ones and see how they sound. So the Max Roach, the Charles Tolliver is going to be great. Never heard that music, no one has, right? So that's going to be great. Sahib Shihab, I could never own another copy of that anywhere, so I'm definitely going to be looking out for that one. And maybe if I was going to say the two others, like I am interested in the Charley Patton, but I want to hear. I want to see if I can find out like how cleaned up those tracks are, since I may already have some of that content. I think the Bill Evans is going to be super exciting. So I would say that those are probably the five that maybe I'm most excited about. But I do think that there's lots of other titles here that are exciting. Like if you're a blues person, you're going to want the BB King and the John Lee Hooker. I kind of want that John Lee Hooker too. I think the Al Jarreau is like a little bit of a like that one. That one could indeed be pretty amazing, depending on just how well that live performance was recorded. So and I could just name all of them, but those are kind of some of my thoughts, some of the ones that I'm most excited about. I hope this recap was helpful for anyone out there who sees this like long list and doesn't know where to start in terms of the stuff that Record Store Day puts out on their website. So yeah, thanks everyone. Let me know what titles you're looking forward to in the comments, and I'll see you next time.